Whoosh. Fig fam, I'm back. It's been a hot minute. I apologize for the delay. Actually, I don't. I was on family vacation, and that means a lot to me. Family first. So, back with figs and coffee. Little cut on my lip, but it's healing. Guys, we are in the thick of summer. Hot, humid in the southeast, which inevitably results in fig rust. It's something that I'm used to having with my fig trees every year, and it's something that I want to battle and control more now that I'm making and growing fig trees for others. So I am going to try something today as an experiment. We're gonna have control, but using sulfur to combat fig rust. There are a lot of ways we can go about getting rid of fig rust, but it is caused by fungus, not some sort of oxidation. It is a small fungus that grows on the leaves themselves. It slowly takes over the leaf, stresses the plant, and that leaf will drop. Fig rust does not necessarily kill your fig trees. If you have really healthy trees, they can fight it on their own sometimes. If you have an environment that doesn't get a lot of wind, that has a lot of humidity, and sometimes not a whole lot of light, you are creating an environment that is conducive to fig rust. Unfortunately, here in Wilmington, North Carolina, we're right in the middle of the southeast here, and it is just an inevitable piece of our climate that it gets hot and humid like that. A lot of my in-ground trees will even get it if we do get some stagnant air or a lot of rain and humidity. In the past, the humidity will kind of taper off come September, October, November, which is great for my late ripening varieties. But let me show you what fig rust looks like on a fig tree. And let me show you what else is growing on in the garden, because guys, we have figs ripening. Ah! It never gets old. I don't know how else to explain it to you guys. It's like Christmas. Look at this thing. Ooh. Kind of a large eye on that one, but hey, I think it's ready to go. We'll give it a test taste. But we have to check out fig rust, see what it looks like. But we're gonna try to use sulfur to combat it, using a spray bottle and a solution from the powder. So let's get into it. Now, fig fam, this is a healthy tree. This is going to play back into my comment on the rule of threes, because it allows open airflow through the middle of the tree while also giving it an option to grow lots of smaller branches and lots of foliage, so you get the airflow as well as fruit, as well as a tree shape. Because we're in the southeast, there's no guarantee you're going to stop exposure to fig rust, but I wanted to highlight how good these leaves look before I show you some of the trees that are struggling. And this is not exempt from fig rust. In fact, you can see it on this tree here. This looks like it would be like sunburn. That's a resultant effect of a weakening leaf due to the fig rust existing on the leaf. So bring it in here, and if you look closely, you see these? That's fig rust. And when that fungus grows and it creates the spores, it releases them from here out to other fig leaves. And so the best habit you can get into when you start noticing fig rust is to collect the leaves. Seems like a pain in the butt, but this time of year, they're not losing all of their leaves unless you have a really bad case of it. But what I do is you gotta collect them and remove them from the site. Otherwise, this is natural fungus that's gonna exist in the environment. So I'll actually remove it and I'll put it in my fire pit, and I will burn it, or it'll decompose over there for the next fire when it dries out again. And it's just a nice place that I can isolate the leaves that I don't want around, because if they fall to the ground, they can continue to grow on the leaves and spread out amongst your other figs. And it is not convenient whatsoever. But you can still have fig rust exposure and have a resilient tree, especially when they're mature like this, to the fig rust taking over. And that comes with healthy pruning in the beginning of the fig tree's life and kind of guiding it along the way. And as it matures, you will end up with a beautiful tree. Another great example is my Peter's honey. And we're getting figs ripening on it, but this fig tree makes tons of delicious honey figs, and they're all starting to swell right now. And I do have some fig rust on them, but I'm rolling with it. because again, this has a healthy growing pattern. If you guys see the color change here, you can see that I had actually painted this with the Ivy Organics plant guard, because when you do a heavy pruning, you're exposing the bark, right? Normally, if we had a wild fig tree growing as a bush or a large tree, the canopy of the leaves are actually protecting the bark of the tree. And when you're doing heavy pruning on a regular basis for a few years and you start to move further south, probably further south than zone, I don't know, 7A, 7B maybe, and you start to head this far south, the UV index is going to go up. And that UV exposure can actually stress the plant a lot. You can get sun scald on the bark, especially on young trees. So painting it with the Ivy Organics plant guard allows A, for respiration of the bark to still happen, and it's organic materials, but B, you protect the tree essentially from sunburn like a sunscreen. So it seems very simple and like, why would a tree need anything like that? But if you were doing anthropogenic pruning of the tree, then you are taking it out of its natural behavior and growing in such that it needs some extra help along the way when it's trying to grow and it's exposed to full sun. But again, this is another example of good pruning with good center airflow avoids the fig rust. All right, guys, here is my back corner. And as you can see, doesn't this tree look quite defoliated? It puts out tons of fruit every year, and there's one downside. It's in the shadiest part and the most wind-protected part of my whole property. And it's also right next to my fence, which is a highway for all my squirrels. So this is actually ended up, this is my Taramo fig, being a trap fig plant for my pests. And I've kind of sacrificed these figs for squirrels that live in my property, for the birds that live in my property, that are right next to the thicket. My white Genoa, same deal. But being in this poor air circulated environment that's shadier and it's very humid back in here, it is very susceptible to fig rust. Now, I've tried to prune it to get good airflow, but it does the best it can. And so it's not a perfect fig tree. It looks really great this spring, but inevitably every time in the middle of the summer, it starts to get stressed after it produces fruit and it gets exposed to the humidity and you end up with fig rust. And now I have a few examples of what that looks like. See the fig rust again here. And what happens is this stresses the leaf. It starts to not feed it as much. And that's when it starts to get sunburnt. And eventually when they turn really yellow, they'll lose that sap flow, they'll get sunburnt more, and they'll crisp up and fall away. And unfortunately, see all these spores right here have probably already released out and landed in other places where it can grow and populate again. So this is fig rust. It will not kill this tree. Next year, this tree will get more figs. It will grow, but it can limit the quantity of growth because a tree without any leaves has a difficult time breathing, and it has to invest more energy in producing more leaves and less energy in producing fruit. So how do we combat this so the tree doesn't have to go through this stressor every year? And I have been kind of researching what kind of fungicides to use, because you could use like a copper fungicide would work incredibly well, right? But I want to try something new because I know copper fungicide has worked well in the past, but I have heard about sulfur and using sulfur for mites as well, and using sulfur for different types of fungi that can attack our fig trees. And I think we've had videos in the past, not from me, but from others using copper fungicide. And do I think it works? Yeah, I think it's great. But I want to give sulfur a try. And using sulfur as a fumigant for pests, as a fungicide, as pest control, has gone back all the way to the Romans. So this isn't a new concept, but I think it's kind of lost touch a little bit if you guys have never used sulfur before. And we are going to try to apply it, not necessarily to my in-ground trees, but to my potted fig trees. They're way closer together. They are younger, and I want them to recover from any fig rust exposure. If they already have fig rust, I want to do my best to control the leaves, because Maybe like sunburnt, where after a while, the fig rust has already taken too much energy of the leaf itself and it's going to fall off inevitably. We're not going to recover the leaf itself, but we can stop what's already happened and remove it, and so further growth can happen in a healthy manner. Also, my young fig trees that I'm growing in this dense format, I want them to grow as healthy and as strong as possible. And these are the ones I'm ultimately selling as a plant nursery to all of you. And the last thing I need is to bring the fig rust right with it. Now, I can't control if you already have fig rust in your area. It's a very common disease that's not just among fig trees, but it's among a lot of large foliar plants. And if you're used to it and you don't mind it, it's not a big deal. It's not going to kill your tree. It's just going to happen every year. And what you'll actually see is that trees that get exposed to fig rust and defoliate completely will push out new growth eventually and be happy again. Because this time, after our early ripening varieties have already fruited, they will go through a second growth phase. And if you live somewhere warm, you're talking like Florida or California, or even like other warm climates in the United States or the world, you may even see a third growth phase before they ultimately go dormant in the winter. But to help encourage safe growth, I want to make sure that I'm not having fig rust on all of my plants that I'm selling for you, because I want my trees to be in the best condition possible for all of you. Like this long dude, I just ripped off 2 small leaves, but see, it's a brand new tree that I rooted this spring. It's ready for sale now, but I saw some fig rust on it. So this long dude has some fig rust on it. I don't want it to expand and grow into these other beautiful leaves that it has just pushed out. I have just fertilized it with more IB Organics. I'm an affiliate. If you guys want really good fertilizer, I love that stuff. I put it on this 3 weeks ago and it's grown a foot. So it's Phil10 if you want a discount code for 10% off. Check out the link in my bio and in the description of this video. Circling back, I am going to spray Sulfur Solution on all of these fig trees. All right, I got my sulfur plant fungicide. I got mosquitoes all around me, but that's okay. And I have my sprayer. I got this sprayer from Ace Hardware, maybe 1.25 gallon home garden sprayer. It's not that great, so I'm going to be investing in a motorized sprayer with a better nozzle on it, because this one's kind of jankety. So Greenwood, you got to step it up. That's all I got to say. I got to take the nozzle off because this nozzle's too fine, and that allows me to actually spray my fig trees more in mass rather than a single tiny small plant. Good news is it's up to 1.25 gallons, and a lot of the solutions of this are divided up by the gallon. I had to do an average of all of these based on what I see for fruit trees. So this says 1 to 2.5 rounded tablespoons for apples. If I go down to grapes, I see 1 to 3 level. Nectarines, peaches, 1 to 3 rounded. So I'm noticing this like 1.5 to 3 range per gallon. Figs have huge foliar leaves, so I'm going to err on the larger side. Or the higher quantity. So I'm thinking 3 of these. As you can see, it's also evening. I had to take a hiatus to check in with my family, and I had parent duties. So I got my 3 tablespoons that are rounded. What's great about 3 tablespoons is that I have a 1/4 cup serving piece, and there are 4 tablespoons in 1/4 cup, and I just so happen to have 1.25 gallon container. So because I have 1.25 gallon and they're asking for 1 to 3 rounded tablespoons, I'm going to go in 3. So just shy of 1/4 cup for 1.25 gallons. Let's fill her up, and then we're going to shake up the solution and then spray it on the leaves. Easy as that. 1 scoop. Let's wrap it up. All right, so I have my contraption here, And I took the nozzle off so I could get adequate spray. Where I really want to focus on spraying my fig trees are these young trees here. And I did a test spray yesterday. You can see there may be some residue. I'm going to show you afterwards some examples of what it may look like after you spray. But I am just going to spray the leaves because I have my portions out. I shook up the solution here, just make sure it was all mixed up and distributed throughout. And even the small leaves, even leaves that were affected, I want to do a thin covering over everything. Some of these need more TLC than others, and some are getting ready for sale that I think will be adequate for a few of my plant sales this fall. One strategy that I'm struggling to figure out how to do is to get the underside of the leaves on a lot of these small trees. If I only had 4 trees, it wouldn't be a big deal. But since I have so many, I'm doing it in mass. I'm also getting lit up by mosquitoes right now. It's hard to get underneath all of these leaves, but you can if you just want to spray or however you spray it and get underneath, because the spores develop on the underside of the leaves too. So keep that in mind. But as far as setting a base tone, you want to get everything started. Sometimes you want it to be perfect and you want to spray the underside of the leaves and top side and make sure you've done everything right. And waiting for it to be perfect sometimes is the worst holdup you can do. It's better just to get started, and you realize you're not getting the underside, come back the next day and try it too. Remember, you're on the growing fig journey. Over time, but not take too long getting started. Because as they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But the next best time is now. It's kind of true. After doing this, it's only been more fun. But I'm getting all the leaves coated. Nice watering coating like they got rained on. And normally this is so counterintuitive to watering your plants because you don't want to get moisture on the leaves, but this is a literal solution to getting the fig rust to stop developing. So if you spray this on the leaves, again, you are not going to remove those spores and fix the fig rust on that leaf. That damage is already there. The spores will die, but the damage of that leaf is there. This is for the unaffected leaves and the future growth. And reminder, when these fig rust leaves do fall off, we did some help by getting this sulfur solution on them, but you will want to remove them from your garden space. But I'm doing a preventative measure by spraying. I'm trying to cover some of the larger figs, but if they have fruit on them, I don't necessarily want to cover this in the fruit. I'm sticking to the young trees that I really want to focus on growing. Here's a healthy Celeste tree that's ready for sale. So you see I've sprayed the tops of these leaves nice and evenly. These ones have a little fig rust on the bottom. I can remove those and separate them from the space. I'm not guaranteeing that this won't be affected later on. And sulfur in smaller amounts, because it is a salt, can actually be a nutrient for your plants as well. So great organic solution that's been around since the Romans. Something I want to remind you guys is that when you do spray with copper fungicide or this sulfur fungicide, it does leave a residue, and that is just the evaporation of the liquid and the remaining sulfur that's in solution there. It'll give residues like this. I'm not worried about it. It's there to do its job and to prevent fig rust from accumulating here and getting rid of any fig rust cells that could be trying to settle on the existing leaves. And ultimately, it'll come off in the rain. See how this one's wet? I sprayed it again. You can start to see some of the residue starting to develop here. You want it to be evenly distributed in your solution, so make sure you're shaking it up. But simple as that. Your fig tree is still happy and healthy. It just has a little residue on it. If you're worried about respiration, that's okay. It should be able to respirate through the sulfur, so don't sweat it. And soon you'll have happier fig trees that will not be affected by fig rust. This is a newer strategy that in the past I haven't worried about, but since I am scaling as a business and I'm creating products for others, I want them to have the healthiest, best looking trees possible, so you guys can ultimately get figs as soon as possible and have great fig trees. I hope these tips help you. I hope this advice for if you are really having a hard time managing fig rust, say on a huge tree. I've seen giant Celeste trees that just struggle with fig rust, go ahead, 3 tablespoons per gallon of solution, shake it up, spray it all over that tree. And this is a preventative measure, so you're going to want to spray it on earlier before you see symptoms of fig rust developing, and ideally before you have any sort of fig ripening going on. So thank you guys. I have a lot of other trees to tend to. If you really enjoy this, like, subscribe, join the fig fam. Happy to answer any questions you have and help you guys grow your own figs. Cheers, fig fam.